it was quite a lively group, I must say. It was raining cats and dogs out there, and people drove all the way from the South Bay to get here to participate with her. So I want to welcome me back from my vacation. Ah, I had a wonderful time. I did have a wonderful time. To say that, to go to my friend Mark's farm and spend 2 weeks there on the big island of Hawaii was restful is an understatement. I want to talk a little bit about that next week. I'm not going to share so much about that because I had something else planned for today. So that being said, before I get into the sort of meat and potatoes of the talk today, I wanted to explain what they didn't put the title up there, so you don't even know what it is. So I could say anything, couldn't I?
Yes.
I could say anything. But it's called The Universe of Spiritual Laws, is what the title is for today. And my friend Chris Howe gave me this wonderful book for Christmas called The Gentle Art of Blessing. And while I was in Hawaii, I read 3.5 books. And I probably could have read more, but I spent a little time swimming and doing some other things too. But in this particular book that Chris gave me, it talked about what is meant by spiritual law and how spiritual law differs from other laws that we might be familiar with, especially law as defined by the dictionary, meaning rules and regulations. I'm talking about law as something that describes a relationship between certain variables or unusual or outrageous circumstances or situations in life. And as thinking people, which is what we are, there's no mistake about it, this philosophy does attract thinking people. As thinking people who move through life from the logical mind concept, it is sometimes difficult to believe something before we can see it. Anybody else had the problem here? Wayne Dyer wrote a book years ago, You'll Believe It When You See It, or You'll See It When You Believe It, right? While I was away, one of the books I read that Linda and Larry Price gave me for Christmas was Eben Alexander's book, Proof of Heaven. Anybody here read that book? Yes, a few. Well, it's about his near-death experience and how it shifted and changed his perspective from a non-believer to a believer. And Eben Alexander is a medical doctor who practices, his field is neurosurgery, so he's credible. And while the internet has done much to disqualify his experience and the book relating to the experience, I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And I was struck on several occasions the resemblance between what my dad told me about his near-death experience and how it related to what Eben Alexander was saying in the book. And I haven't read a lot about that. I know that another medical doctor, Moody, Dr. Ron Moody, I think his name is, has written a lot about near-death experience from his perspective as a physician as well. But after hearing my own dad's experience of it, and it sounded like my dad was on drugs, really, when he was sharing what had happened to him. And basically I think what the disclaimer is on the internet for Eben Alexander's book is a very similar kind of thing. Pierre Proudhon said, the man who wrote The Art of Gentle Blessing said, the scientific approach to reality excludes the idea of a miracle with the connotation of an event that could happen in a gratuitous and unpredictable manner outside the context or structure of the laws governing the universe. Now, for me, the thing about this statement that really gets to me is that they've done blind studies of the significance, for instance, of the power of prayer on a group of cardiac patients. It's been documented, for instance, and it was determined that those who were being prayed for actually improved more and better and recovered more quickly than those who were in the blind study who were not prayed for. So my question is, so is it possible perhaps that maybe there's some other force at work here? Could be. The scientific community is beginning to understand and even appreciate that there are spiritual laws at work in the universe, and this is a good thing. It's a very good thing as far as I'm concerned. The first or second day I was in Hawaii, I was bitten by some critter. Mark said it appeared to be a centipede that bit me right here on the arm. And I didn't really think anything of it. There were two little puncture marks about 1/8 of an inch apart on my right arm. And while it didn't hurt all that much, it was itchy and hot to the touch. And a large bump began to form. And he was concerned about me having an allergic reaction to it and wondering if he should take me to the hospital to get a shot of something, which didn't appeal to me at all, I can tell you that. And he didn't want it to become infected either. Well, while I was staying there, a wonderful healer is living on the property. His name is James Ayotte, and he is on sabbatical from his medical profession, and he does something called access healing. And he asked if he might do some hands-on healing for me. And I thought, well, how bad could that be? So, of course, I said yes. And we sat down to dinner right after he put his hands on me, and we were all still having a conversation and talking back and forth. So I really didn't pay a lot of attention to what he was doing. I kind of forgot about it, actually. And when I went back to my place after dinner, and I was brushing my teeth with my right hand, I looked down and the bump was totally gone. The itching had subsided, and the little pinpoint marks where I'd been bitten were gone. Well, isn't that interesting, I thought. And I just kind of stood there and looked at it, sort of dumbfounded. Now, I didn't not believe in James's ability because I let him have his way with me. And I also didn't give it a lot of credibility because my logical mind wasn't totally convinced either. And yet, as I stood there looking at my arm, I was transfixed. The evidence was there, or not there, as the case may be. And I just stood there looking at it. You know, I'm trying to reconcile this in my head and to look at my arm, which was ugly and really quite uncomfortable prior to dinner. But what I realized that was the presence of something sacred. And for the moment, I was in awe of what had just happened. Prevaran calls it astonished wonder in the face of the infinite. And I get that. We have periodic bouts of that, don't we? We all have moments where we stand in awe of our own consciousness because how did I create that? Well, how is a product of the logical mind. The ego mind wants to know how. In the God mind, or in that consciousness of the creative intelligence, we don't need to know how. We just need to accept that it happens. Dr. Robert Bitzer, who was a contemporary of Ernest Holmes and was the pastor of the Hollywood Church of Religious Science on Sunset Boulevard for years and years and years, said that life is all consciousness. It's all consciousness. And if, as Prevaran says, the ultimate fabric of the universe, of life itself, is consciousness, who would ever want to be less conscious? You know, this was a moment of a supreme consciousness for me when I looked down and saw that my arm was healed. And so because there is that little part of me that may still be the doubting Thomas, if you will, the next morning when I got up, the first thing I did was look at my arm, was to make sure that what I hadn't seen wasn't a figment of my imagination, kind of thing. So our job, as Ernest Holmes says, and he's been telling us for 75 years, is to live in tune with these spiritual laws. And when we do, whatever healing needs to take place does so with a minimum of effort, because it becomes the natural order of things. Having a healing consciousness is natural. It's a natural thing. It is not unnatural for this thing to be gone. It is very natural. We are not intended to be poor or sick or unhealthy or lonely. None of those things are the natural order of thought. We are intended to be wealthy and healthy and in right and perfect relationship with all people and all situations and circumstances. We are intended to play the game of life, as Florence Scovel Shinn says, according to the rules of this awesome creative intelligence that doesn't need us to micromanage one single thing about its usefulness. We do not need to tell God how to do anything. You know, that's arrogant on our part at some level. You know, to think that I know better than God knows, or that I know better than what the natural order of things is in the universe. We have within us the capacity to accept the idea of an all-encompassing, completely dependable, creative intelligence that can be applied to the solution of any problem, any circumstance, any situation that we may have in our lives. This creative intelligence that is within me and within every person that is here today is something that is incredibly useful. It's incredibly useful. And the supreme quality of this creative intelligence is unconditional love. Unconditional love, which is incapable of punishing us for anything that we've ever done, are doing, or might do in the future. There's no punishment here. As Ernest Holmes tells us time and time again, we are not punished for our sins, but by our sins. And sin, again, is just an archery term, which means missing the mark. Missing the mark. As humans, we sometimes do miss the mark. Diane's creative thought was incredibly apropos this morning. You know, sometimes we do take things personally. Sometimes we do not always do our best. And sometimes, you know, there are opportunities for growth in every one of these things. You know, the beautiful thing on our journey to self-discovery is that we are involved with this loving and generous God, not the God that we grew up with. This intelligence has provided for us an opportunity to choose and choose again. If our desires didn't demonstrate through one means of expression, we can choose again and again and again. That's the beauty of us. For many of us who grew up in traditional religion, spiritual laws are those that are maybe focused on the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not. And whatever thou shalt not, you know, it scared the living daylights out of me when I was a child. I don't know about you. I grew up Catholic. And boy, oh boy, some of those things, you know, we were led to believe that we were going to burn in the fires of hell for eternity because we shall did on some of those things, you know. I mean, I know I wasn't the only one who played Adam and Eve down by the pond, you know. Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. And that's a whole other story, I got to tell you. We were innocent. Do you understand? You know, when we did some of those things, it was done totally in innocence. And the parental issue was that, you know, they had all this baggage attached to what they thought was right or wrong. We just thought it was fun. That was all. Anyway, I digress. That pond story, though, does bear repeating at some later time. I have news for you. If you've been in this teaching for a while, though, you know that there's no punishment meted out by this God of our understanding. This God that we've created, or that Ernest Holmes helped us create, is a loving and generous God. Oh my gosh. Yes, there is a part of us that knows sometimes our choices are not of the highest order and that we do make mistakes periodically. And yet, when we realize a mistake has been made, the wonderful opportunity that we have when we've done something that might be deemed as thoughtless or inconsistent with our perfection, we have the opportunity to immediately apologize and to begin again. In Hawaii, the practice of Ho'oponopono is just huge. And it always takes us back to who we are as individuals. Please forgive me for whatever it is in me that created this in you. I love you. Thank you. I apologize. What a wonderful statement to be made. The other person doesn't even need to know that we're making that statement. In a few weeks, I'm going to do a talk on the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And this is one of the great laws of the universe, one of the most astoundingly real laws of the universe. And when we look at it from the standpoint of how would I feel if I had this done to me, we would never, ever treat anyone in a way that could possibly hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes we feel hurt unnecessarily by the thoughtlessness of someone else. But, sometimes it's also our reaction to something that they're doing that has nothing to do with them. It always has to do with us. Now, I have this Tuesday night class, and it's coming to a close this week. And these last 8 weeks have flown by unbelievably. I want everybody who's in that class, who's here today, to stand up this morning. Look at these people, these wonderful people. Thank you. The reason I asked you to stand up is because by their applause, we've all acknowledged how brilliant you really are. As you may or may not know, this class was called Building a Healing Consciousness, Going from Average to Awesome. And each of these students, only 3 of the students out of the 35 have stepped away from the class for various reasons. 32 students have finished the class and stepped into their awesomeness in a huge way. They got to understand the concept of spiritual law in that it represents one of the highest freedoms that there is. Alan Cohen said something so profound. He said that the only thing more dangerous than being vulnerable is being absent. I mean, put that in your pipe and smoke it for a second. The only thing more dangerous than being vulnerable is being absent. And as the students were sharing, they did treasure maps for one another. They paired up. Each student paired up with another student, and they did treasure maps. Only what happened is their partner did the treasure map for them. Now, you talk about being vulnerable. If we open the doors to let other people in life in, we take the chance of what we would call, quote unquote, losing. But if we close the doors, we are lost, right? And these people allowed other people to see their lives for them through these treasure maps that were made. Some of them are just incredible works of art. And asking the students, was there a sense of vulnerability in this project? Yes, because I want my treasure map to look the way I want it to look, not the way somebody else thinks it should look for me. But guess what happened? It was such a beautiful thing that somebody else could know our truth for us, in spite of the necessary thought of having to control everything. God isn't looking for stars. God is looking for players in the game of life. This is what I get as my understanding of spiritual law. People who are willing to dress up and show up for themselves in a bigger way and with a larger intention than just getting stuff and things. Because really, that's not what this philosophy is about. You may have come here thinking that this is a sort of a, I'm going to manifest stuff. I'm going to demonstrate things. I think The Secret did us a great disservice with that idea. But when the heart calls us to the next step, surrender to it. Surrender to it. Life will change for the better because it is guided by the heart and not the logical mind. The logical mind will always argue for its limitations. So spiritual law doesn't really have anything to do with the logical mind. It has to do with the heart-centered desire to be the best that I know how to be the best that we know how to be. If we're willing to show up and play nice, God turns us into stars. If we simply sit on the bench and watch the game, we can see all the errors the other players are making. However, our potential as players goes largely untapped. I am the star of my life. You are the star of your life. This is a spiritual law unto itself. And I am willing to show up in a bigger way so that when I leave this planet, I have made a difference. There are 32 people in this class who have made a difference. They've made a difference. And as one of the students shared, she got a sense of what awesome represents just by looking at the faces of all these other people in class. Thinking about going from average to awesome might have appeared to be very sort of egotistical in its proportion. But really what it was about, if I can see awesome in you, then I can recognize awesome in me. So, the admonition for today is for each of us to walk the journey of spiritual self-discovery with love, dignity, and commitment. That's the spiritual law. But when it's time to let go of what no longer serves us, do the same with love, dignity, and commitment, knowing that with God, all things are possible. Will you join me in consciousness, please? Thank you. Thank you so much. Please join me. And so as we go within today, we go within to that awesome place of truth, that very sacred space within each and every one of us, where the idea of wholeness is never at issue, where the idea of healing is never at issue. It is that place of perfect peace within each one of us that knows only right and good and fair and loving and peace and harmony. From this place of absolute acceptance for who and what I am, I speak this truth in the first person for all here present today. Because I know that the collective consciousness is an outpicturing of the individual consciousness of every person here. That as we move to that extended idea of our own personal greatness, it is revealed to us in a way that we can understand. That there is nothing that anybody can say about me that is contrary to Spirit's idea of the highest and best of who I am. And so today I set aside any kind of criticism, any kind of judgment, any kind of resentment that I might be carrying in favor of knowing a greater truth that God is all there is. And in this great truth, it is revealed to me in a way that is perfectly designed for the best life ever. I know for each and every one of us today that there is a quality of being that surpasses anything and everything that I may be experiencing at the relative level. That what appears to be in my life, what appears to be in Ukraine today, what appears to be as might be termed terminal illness, that it is all good, it is all God, and there is a greater idea that is being called forth for me to know something more about who and what I am. So I step back today as the observer of my life, and I begin to see what my role is and how I participate. And I begin to shift and change whatever it is in my life that needs to be shifted and changed so that I can deal with life from that absolute place of surrender and acceptance of anything and everything that is going on. And so today, I know that this is the truth for each and every person here, that the spiritual laws of the universe are sacrosanct, that they are sacred in their proportion to who and what I am. And so I simply acknowledge that I am willing to do and to be and to have that pure essence of spirit as playing first in my life. I joyfully receive and give thanks today for this awareness, for this knowledge, and I simply accept that this is how it is, knowing as I release my word to the law, it is done and complete in the mind of God, as we say together, and so it is.